The AI chip landscape has long been described as NVIDIA and nobody else. But for the first time, something that genuinely deserves to be called a second force may finally be taking shape. The news that Microsoft Azure has adopted AMD's rack-scale AI platform, Helios, is not just a runner-up landing another design win. In my view, it marks a turning point where a giant customer has started to deliberately cultivate the number two for its own strategic reasons. That said, a wall of an entirely different dimension still looms in front of AMD.
Hello everyone, I'm Ty, and I've spent 31 years in the semiconductor industry. Today, I want to dig into the news that Microsoft Azure has adopted AMD's rack-scale AI platform, Helios. In this video, I'll explain three things with real numbers. Why this adoption is not simply a bulk purchase of GPUs. Why Microsoft's real aim is not replacement, but reducing its dependence. And why, even so, AMD's fight remains a genuinely tough one.
Before we get into the details, let me use an analogy about the kitchen of a giant hotel chain. Imagine a hotel chain whose entire business lives and dies on the reputation of its food. It sources almost all of its ingredients from a single supplier, the one everyone calls the king of the industry. The quality is flawless, absolutely top of the line. And because every hotel wants the same thing, the most popular items are always being fought over.
But leaning on one supplier for nearly everything has a clear weakness. When prices go up, there's no alternative to turn to. When a popular ingredient is scarce, all you can do is wait for your allocation. You have no complaints about the quality, and yet, at the negotiation table, you are always in the weaker position. So the hotel chain, without ending its relationship with the king, begins to raise a second supplier with its own hands. What's fascinating is how that second supplier decides to fight. Instead of pitching individual ingredients, it switches to a completely different offer. We'll handle the whole thing for you, from designing the kitchen to the cooking equipment to managing the recipes. The reasoning is that while it can't win selling ingredients one by one, it just might win by taking on the entire kitchen.
In fact, not long ago, this second supplier was winning contracts with what amounted to a dowry attached. Sign with us, and we'll throw in the right to buy shares of our company at a bargain price. Lately, though, it has started to win whole kitchen adoptions through ordinary business deals, no dowry required. That shift is a big deal. From here, let me walk you through how this story is actually playing out on the real industrial stage.
Microsoft has announced that it will adopt AMD's rack-scale AI platform, Helios, in its Azure cloud. AMD is the major US chipmaker chasing the king, NVIDIA, in AI GPUs. Helios is a configuration that bundles and optimizes an entire rack at once. The Instinct MI455X GPU, the next-generation Venice CPU, Pensando networking, and the ROCm software stack, all tuned to work together as a single unit.
The key point is that this is not about how many GPUs you buy, but about adopting the entire rack as one. As AI workloads spread from training to inference, search, and agentic AI, cloud providers now need a flexible foundation that can handle a wide variety of jobs. The competition in AI infrastructure is shifting away from a contest over the raw performance of a single GPU and toward the integrated design of the whole rack. Helios is scheduled to begin shipping in the second half of 2026. Azure is also getting new virtual machines. There's the HDV2, aimed at agentic AI, and the HXV2, aimed at semiconductor design, both powered by 6th-generation EPYC processors. I'm especially watching HXV2 because putting the very computing foundation used to design chips onto the cloud is a genuinely notable move. And Microsoft is not the only one betting on AMD's AI platform. Oracle plans to start offering 50,000 units of the MI450 series from the third quarter of 2026, and Anthropic is planning a rollout from the first half of 2027, starting at 1 gigawatt and scaling up to as much as 2 gigawatts. OpenAI is looking at up to 6 gigawatts, and Meta at up to 6 gigawatts as well. Just those three companies, OpenAI, Meta, and Anthropic, add up to as much as 14 gigawatts. Now, here's where the professional deep dive begins.
It's tempting to read this as Microsoft has started switching from NVIDIA to AMD, but that's not how I see it at all. What Microsoft wants to lower is not the volume of NVIDIA it uses, but its dependence on NVIDIA. Helios is not a replacement for the king, it's a second axis. In fact, back in March of this year, Microsoft said it had deployed several 100,000 NVIDIA GPUs in under a year, and it has also stated it will roll out the next generation parts. The volume isn't shrinking, but if NVIDIA's share of total procurement comes down, Microsoft can say, at the table, we have other options too when negotiating on price or supply. For a giant cloud provider, cultivating a second axis is itself a matter of corporate strategy. And on AMD's side, an interesting reversal is taking place. Its insistence on chasing everything in-house, CPUs, GPUs, networking, and software all at once, was long seen as a weakness that spread its resources too thin. Yet the moment the main battlefield shifted to the integrated design of the entire rack, having all of it turned into a strength. A weakness got flipped into an advantage by a change in the times. The nature of its customer wins has changed too. AMD has granted OpenAI and Meta warrants to buy shares at 1 cent each, up to 160 million shares each, depending on performance milestones, for a combined total of up to 320 million shares. That's the dowry-attached sales pitch from my analogy. With Anthropic, however, the arrangement flipped the other way. AMD is investing up to $5 billion. You could read this as a sign that AMD is moving into a stage where it can sell without a dowry, but since investment is simply a different form of consideration, I think it's still too early to declare that outright.
That said, let's look at the numbers with a cool head. NVIDIA's R&D division has around 31,000 people. That is roughly equal to AMD's entire headcount. On R&D spending, NVIDIA is at about $18.5 billion versus AMD's roughly $8.1 billion. And AMD is pouring 23% of its revenue into R&D just to reach that figure. Compared with NVIDIA, which can produce $18.5 billion from only 8.6% of its revenue, the sheer financial muscle really is on another level. Actually, back in May of this year, I rated AMD as a company that would grow simply because the AI market as a whole is expanding. In other words, a beneficiary living off the leftovers. Today, I'm revising that assessment upward a bit because giant customers are no longer just passing along their surplus demand. They are now building AMD into their own strategy and raising Helios together with it. That's a different thing entirely from being a passive number two. To sum up my read, AMD has taken a step forward from just a runner-up to a genuine second force. A runner-up waits to be called upon. A second force is one of the players who actually shapes the structure of the industry. But given the gap in R&D power, it's far too early to say AMD stands shoulder to shoulder with the king. The hard fight will continue, yet AMD has moved forward from where it stood last time. That's my conclusion for today. Now, the impact on Japan. What I'd watch is the move to put chip design on the cloud that HXV2 represents. If the large-scale computation of chip design can be rented from the cloud, then Japanese design firms and research institutions that struggle to own their own computing facilities may find it far easier to reach a cutting-edge design environment. On top of that, the very fact that AI infrastructure investment is spreading across multiple players could itself be a tailwind for the Japanese companies that support this industry with equipment and materials. There are 3 points to watch going forward. Whether Helios ships on schedule in the second half of 2026 and runs stably, how close ROCm can practically come to the CUDA ecosystem that NVIDIA has spent years building up, and how far this strategy of cultivating a second axis spreads to other cloud providers. Only when all 3 of these line up, in my view, will the position of second force become the real thing. Let me wrap up. Microsoft Azure has adopted AMD's Helios. The aim is not to replace NVIDIA, but to reduce dependence on it, and I see AMD as having taken a step forward toward becoming a second force that giant customers are actively cultivating. At the same time, the gap in R&D muscle remains on another dimension entirely.
It's a hard road, but AMD has moved forward from last time. That's the news for today.
That's all for today. I'll keep bringing you semiconductor news and analysis, so if you found this useful, please like, subscribe, and I'll see you in the next video. This has been Ty on Semiconductor News Decoded.